So, it's an inside look on my interview with my mom, Patricia Reynolds, whose family, actually, her mom and dad, her mom is from Alsace-Lorraine, France, which is territory that borders France and Germany. Obviously, we'll get into that a little bit. And her father was from Switzerland, but we do not discuss that. And then, obviously, my dad's side, I am African American, but we do not discuss any of that. So, this is a little background on my lovely mother, Patricia. This is a nice photo that was taken just the other day when she came up to visit for Mother's Day. So, she's a single parent. She raised me by herself since I was 3 years old when my father passed away. She's overcome a lot of difficult situations, um, and she's very strong. And then, I look up to her in a lot of different ways, and she's my hero, and she knows that. And we connect on a lot of different levels, and you know, she's just the greatest ever. She's currently working as a home health aide in Lake George. Um, she was hit by a car when I was 3 years old or around that time, and was told that she was never going to walk again. And that's one of those things that, you know, leads me to, or that makes her, my idol, and, puts her on such a high pedestal in my life and in my eyes, because it's just such a amazing feat and such a strong thing to do. She's just such a strong woman, and it's just an amazing thing to look to. And she's the youngest of six children, was born and raised in Warren, Pennsylvania. So a little background on Alsace-Lorraine, France. It is a territory, like I said a little earlier, on the border of France and Germany, that throughout both the country's history has kind of been at a tug of war as to which side it belongs to. It was ceded from France to Germany in 1871 after the Franco-German War. It would continue to go back and forth with the other world wars following, and it finally retroceded back to France after World War II. Under German rule, Lorraine in the late 19th century was considered an imperial state, and constant battle for each country's government was always happening to try and assimilate the population back to their culture. So when I was searching through policies, it was a little hard to figure out like what I felt affected my family. As you'll come to find out in like the interview, I'll explain. But what I found here was like the Steerage Act of 1819, which is a half-hearted attempt to improve such transatlantic travel conditions, but which obviously, I'm sure everyone knows, which are renowned to be very poor and very tough conditions to come across the waters. But the regulations it introduced did little to actually address the horrors of the 19th century in the steerage. And the steerage is actually just a catch-all term for the lowest level class of sea travel. So it's just, just very poor people and like just lowest level low class. Close to 5,000 deaths came from sea travel in 1847 alone. So that's just pretty big numbers, I feel like. And, for people who are looking for better opportunity, I feel like that's not the opportunity you should be, and like the end result you should be gaining on travel over as well. That's just not great opportunity, and the promise is not being given to you, and that's just not fair. So obviously something needs to be done about that, but actual actions need to be done, not just an act passed. People are still being crammed into tight, unclean quarters. The Steerage Act basically was the first thing that allowed for any type of log to be kept of immigrants traveling from Europe to America, but just not enforced too much in the start. The light regulations left the door open for other travelers as well, like Irish immigrants. It wasn't until 1855 that the U.S. Congress passed far more comprehensive regulations of the passenger vessels. The Carriage of Passenger Acts of the 1855 specified the maximum number of steerage passengers per square feet of, quote, clear space, which is one person every 18 square feet, which listed detailed provisions that must be stocked for every ship, even those arriving in America, and most importantly, required ventilators to carry off the foul air from the stifling steerage hold, which does a lot because, you can imagine you got a lot of people traveling over space with a lot of, probably uncleanly hygiene. So you can only imagine how smelly the odor gets down there. So, highlights of the interview for me, I feel like would be one thing that actually was pretty wild for me. That would just be the whole thing of learning of Alsace-Lorraine, because that was just brand new knowledge in my 22 years. Learning that I had any family from there. It was information that my mom had just found in some paperwork about her grandparents on her mother's side. So that was a pleasant surprise I got. I knew we had family from France. It was just a matter of pinpointing where, and it also made more sense to me because she had always referred to her mother as a German, and the fact that a territory went back and forth between control from each country shows why so much influence still had stayed around. So it kind of was just like all the dots connecting. So that was kind of cool in my mind. But obviously, but not too many stories were recalled from her childhood just because her relationship with her mom wasn't always the best. So conversations about her family's immigration story weren't always really the biggest topic of discussion. She also, there was a pretty big gap in her family. She was the youngest by a good amount of years. So when she was in the house, her siblings were almost all out of the house. So there wasn't too much family time going on as you would almost imagine it going on in other houses. So she wasn't as connected. So the reason she also explained was her mother was pretty nasty to her and rude. She really couldn't just wait to get out of the house. She also connected a lot of the time her mom being German with being rude. So that's what I kind of always got growing up. I don't know if that's some type of horrible stereotype, but that's what my mom would tell me. So reason she didn't ask too many questions about her family history as a child, just because she never wanted to be around. So that was kind of just the whole idea I was getting from her the whole time. With the themes that we connected from the literature review and the interview, definitely stayed true and true. Obviously, like I said, there wasn't too much information that I could get out of her from it, but at the same time, you can assume with people coming over, you can only imagine what they have to go through. So you could, just, being logical, just sit there and, have a couple ideas of, themes of what they would sit there and want to have. And courage and perseverance are definitely some staples of what it takes to just make it over. And like I said, even though I couldn't get to the most direct stories of my family, there's no denying that it takes an immense amount of courage to pick up everything and leave, especially when you don't know what to expect on the other side. Obviously, the goal is for a better life and more opportunities, but that isn't the guarantee. There were also horrible conditions that were being faced that didn't even bat an eye at. I also said power and corruption at one point. So the Steerage Act is a perfect example of this, where the people you're supposed to be able to trust are the ones pulling their hoods right over your eyes and lying right through their teeth to you. So you're leaving countries, because they're not giving you what they promised, and you're going right into what you think is great opportunity, but obviously at the same time, it could just be a big old trap. So who knows? But I feel like the biggest story of it all is survival. And, they made it, they lived to tell the tale, and they can continue creating their family and culture and identity. And you hear all these stories of how horrible the transportation was for immigrants, and they didn't get much better treatment-wise. So the whole story always has been survival and growth to make this place better than when we found it. So I feel like it's just key to hone in on that. In my mind, the value of this project is just seeing the importance of cultural identity and how you should hold on to the stories of how your families have just survived throughout time. If you don't have too many of them, you should make it a point just to create some moving forward, or to seek out the knowledge of your past. And kind of just to wrap it up in conclusion, I think this whole process was impactful. It's also helped build closer relationships between us students and whoever we interviewed, even if it was someone as close as our mother. I still think it was a good key experience. Coming up with interview questions at first was a little difficult because it seemed I had already asked everything there was to ask about her family. I was pleasantly surprised to find out more than I thought I was going to due to being her son. And being so curious growing up, it seemed like the well was dry, but I suppose that was not the case. I think it was very important for people to continue to move across the globe, no matter the country they are trying to move into, because diversity is a must in my mind. There's been far too much division. Uh, we all have a story, and there's no reason that it shouldn't be told, but too many times people are dissuaded, and there needs to be another way around it. My biggest takeaway from this whole thing is I'm glad that I have a great relationship with my mom, and I can go to her and ask her stories about what she does know, and she does her best to tell me all her information. I will forever be grateful of that relationship that I do have with her.